As the quality of Hollywood filmmaking has become somewhat stagnant over the last several decades, the horror genre has fallen into the exact same traps as action movies, rom-coms, superhero films, parodies, comedies, and thrillers. You can only rehash the same content so often, and repeatedly doing sequels, prequels, and spin offs will only get you so far. This isn't necessarily a new thing. The Exorcist, after all, was getting sequels as far back as the 70s, and Friday the 13th and Halloween sequels, well, we've been getting those forever. It's probably the reason that documentaries have exploded in popularity. Real life has become far more interesting than fiction. That said, every now and then a new fresh IP does arrive on the scene to shake things up. Sometimes they make a huge splash like 2018's A Quiet Place, or they quietly disappear into the ether only to be enjoyed by a select few. Hunter x Hunter was released onto Hulu in 2020 to very little fanfare. In fact, the only reason I know it exists at all is because someone personally recommended it to me. Much like the horror western classic Bone Tomahawk, I was completely blindsided by how much I loved it. Before we get started, click on the red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. Hunter x Hunter is a movie that spends its 90 minutes completely defying your expectations. The Mersault family lives deep in the Canadian wilderness. They make their living as fur trappers, with the husband and wife duo of Joe and Anne raising their young daughter Renee. They're fully aware of the outside world, but choose to live as simple people, knowing that society is leaving them behind. Joe hunts wildlife to feed the family, and Anne educates Renee while occasionally letting the girl learn the basics of survival from her father. The family drama slowly unwinds, and for a film with such a short runtime, it's fairly staggering how much movie is actually here. Armed with a fantastically simple script and a deep understanding of characters, director Shawn Linden has built a world that feels almost made for TV at times, but ultimately proves itself as something crafted to make the audience deeply uncomfortable. Don't let yourself be fooled by the initial simplicity. Hunter x Hunter wants to get under your skin in more ways than one. It touches on topics of sexual violence, trust, human nature, instinctual behavior, and survival by any means. The minutiae of hunting and trapping animals, skinning deer, and selling scraps for pennies are covered in painstaking detail. In addition to the family, we get a compelling side story which follows a pair of local police officers going about their everyday business. They do boring things like write tickets for the snobby locals and scrape up dead animals off the side of the road. These two people, Barthas and Lucy, they don't speak like Hollywood characters, they talk like real people, a feature that permeates the entire script. Their back and forth dialogue about Barthas' smelly lunch and how annoying their jobs are provides a basic understanding of their lives, but nothing more. They also provide the only humor in a setting that is permeated by darkness, and this element proves to be essential to the film's enjoyment. Much like the Mersault family, there's nothing spectacular about these two. Drawing the audience into a world like this is difficult work, and the movie often feels like a made-for-TV affair. But make no mistake, while this world feels uncomplicated and harsh, that's the exact point. Linden wants to disarm you and almost bore you with the details before he unleashes a nasty, pessimistic, and unexpected third act. A lot of horror movies struggle with their endings, but this thing has absolutely no problem ratcheting things up to a nearly comical degree. Hunter x Hunter features the most bonkers finale since 2007's The Mist, and the final 30 minutes are among the straight-up darkest you will see for a very long time. Devon Sawa's Joe is a simple man. He enjoys tracking, hunting, and surviving. I might be reading a bit too much into it though. Joe tracks, he hunts, and he survives. Whether he actually enjoys these things is up to the audience interpretation, and Sawa's portrayal is both intricate and simple. He's a hard guy to read, and oftentimes I was left wondering if Joe was just content existing in this world, or if he found himself stuck in an existence he never wanted. I also found myself laughing out loud because Joe wakes up at the butt crack of dawn, something that I can sadly relate to. It's not my fault. I just wake up early. Anne Mersault is played by Camille Sullivan, and she exists as both a loving mother and fierce protector of her family. While she makes a handful of head-scratching decisions late in the film, this is very much her story. The movie's evolution from survival thriller to outright horror rests on her shoulders, and Sullivan does an outstanding job in this part. Young actress Summer Howell does a fine job with Renee, even if she mostly acts as a pawn piece to help steer the narrative. Gabriel Daniels and Lauren Cochrane's performances as Barthas and Lucy stand out not just for their simplicity, but for their evolution. Instead of being simple side characters, they prove just as critical as the rest of the cast, and their ultimate fates are just as emotionally taxing as the rest. It's very easy for a movie's B-plot to be overshadowed by the main storyline, link in description for my Godzilla vs. Kong review if you want a textbook example, but that's fortunately not the case here. Every single character in Hunter x Hunter has just the right amount of subtlety and fits into the story exactly as they should. The last piece of the puzzle is Nick Stahl's Lou, who's introduced during the second half. He's a mysterious stranger who plays an essential part in the finale and whose fate is ultimately woven into the entire film. I haven't seen Nick Stahl since 2003's Terminator 3, and he gives a small but explosive performance which impacts so much of Hunter x Hunter. Stahl has had a number of personal issues during the last 2 decades, and it's really nice to see him featured in such a prominent role. While Hunter x Hunter is both an outstanding thriller and a fascinating horror movie, it's not without its flaws. Characters occasionally make dumb choices for ambiguous reasons, the music can feel occasionally forced, and the film's dark nature will 100% turn some people off. The movie also has a habit of disregarding some characters for long stretches of time, with one particular example being impossible to ignore. Undoubtedly, some people will see this as a criticism, but I actually see it as a compliment to the power of the story and a necessary component of the script. Let me be straightforward. None of these issues even come close to derailing a taut and expertly crafted horror classic. If you're looking for a big budget picture with big name actors and all the technical bells and whistles, look elsewhere. If you're looking for a nasty, intense, low budget masterpiece with a wild ending that will completely defy your expectations and have you thinking about it for days, Hunter x Hunter is the one for you. Thank you so much for checking out the review. If you found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video since that tells YouTube my channel is worth promoting. Hit me up in the comments, let me know what you think of Hunter x Hunter, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.